don't get a second crack at reputation. If you blow it, it's a long way back, you know. I'd say protect it with your life, you know.
There was no retail experience, no money to get you started, just a yearning for success.
I went in and lifted a ring and I said, how much is this? And she said, £400, you know, and I was like, you can break far more rules as a startup than you can as an established business. And like, and you're charging me a fiver, mate, and I know you're paying £1 for it. We don't have to pay a guy with an armoured vehicle to come down and empty the shop.
Yeah.
We've had so many big cash thefts out of our company over the years, you know. We love cards. You've got to be careful. It doesn't suit everybody, and it can be stressful. It can be lonely. It can ruin relationships. You know.
So thank you so much, Pete, for coming on the Dig podcast.
Yes, thanks for the music. I'm not sure where.
So Eye of the Tiger, like you have the Eye of the Tiger. I thought about this carefully.
I bought that record. That's how old I am. So.
So I was trying to match the music to the person, and when I think of him, it's like nobody's going to stand in the way of a tiger, and that's what I think of when I'm talking to Pete. So let's bring it back for those who don't know Pete, to the early days. There was no retail experience, no money to get you started, just a yearning for success. Tell me about it. It's fascinating, but tell everybody else who's listening.
Well, I got up to A level, and my friends had all gone off to college, and I said to my mum, you know, I don't really want to go to university because I liked work. I'd been working in a factory in Strabane, and I just liked the workplace. There was no exam at the end of the week. You know, if you worked harder than the next guy, you got the rewards, and your boss was pleased. You know, if you turned up earlier, he didn't complain. You know, so in school, there was always a smarter guy, didn't work as hard, but always got better grades than you. And in football, you could train all you like, and the guy that hadn't turned up to training all week, he'd turn up and get picked, you know. But at work, if you didn't turn up, you get sacked. And I was the type of guy that tried everything, you know. So I was full of enthusiasm. My mother used to describe me as a bull at a gate. She says, you're like a bull at a gate, Peter. You've no patience. Everything has to be now. And so a friend had made me a gift as a thank you for doing her a favour. It was a little piece of art. And I was touring around music festivals at the time, just going to the festivals. And I'd seen a lot of like hippie guys selling stuff at the festivals, and I thought that could be me, you know. So I said, dear, make me 20 of those. I'll sell those at the Ballyshannon Folk Festival. And I'd sold them all by the Saturday night, but still a full day to go. So I phoned her and said, you know, could you make me some more and get them up from Strabane to Ballyshannon? So she stayed up all night, made me another 20, and I sold those on the Sunday. And in the process, I had given a space to a guy and his wife. It was their first festival, and they were selling jewellery. And we got on really well over the weekend. And when you're running a stall, somebody has to look after it when you go to the toilet or to get coffee. And so you work together as a kind of group and help each other out. And Bernard and his wife at the end of it said, you know, Pete, you should come up to Dublin. We'll introduce you to jewellery wholesalers. He said, you know, it's much easier carrying earrings than that stuff that you're carrying, which was framed art, you know. So I went up to Dublin. I'd made about 400 punts at the time and spent it all on jewellery. And there was a little wholesale quarter on George Street. And I went to Flaghuel, was in Sligo, and I sold out on the Saturday. I made 1,200 punts. I remember taking a photograph. I got my mate Dee to take a photograph and put the money in my mouth. I said, I've never had this much money. And I took this photograph with 12.
I did ask him if he had the photo, but he's located it for me.
The way but so that was my introduction to jewellery, and I met a guy at this Flaghuel called Eric Byrne, and he had this beautiful Dublin brogue, you know, and he lived in Spittal in Galway, and he made jewellery out of Irish coins that were just awesome. But I hung out with Eric some on the weekend, and Eric he had a great way of selling. Nowadays he'd been Instagram, doing something on Instagram. Those days you had to stand in the street, so I was good at it. I discovered I was good at selling, and I remember thinking, this is what I want to do here. So I never worked for anybody again after that. That was kind of the last time I ever got a job. I was about 19 at the time.
So your journey started with like the market stall kind of model, isn't that right?
Yeah, it wasn't quite market stall, because markets were a bit dowdy, you know, like they were kind of crap. In Strabane there was one, and it was on the end of, was next to the cattle market, you know, so it was always really cheap stuff and blah, blah, blah. But I don't. There's still stalls on O'Connell Street, so we would see the stalls on O'Connell Street, and those guys were my wholesalers. So there was like 2 or 3 guys imported all the goods, put them on O'Connell Street, and so we would go and set up places where you really weren't allowed to trade. So the market was always at the back end of the town, so we'd go and find somewhere like the best pitch in town, which nearly always was the bank. So the banks tended to have the best pitch in town. They closed at lunchtime on a Friday, and they didn't open again till Monday. So all you had to do was find the bank manager's name. So if it was Mr. Doherty or Mr. Leahy, and you'd go in and ask the friend, what's the bank manager's name, Mr. Leahy? And then when they close, you'd set up outside the bank, and the police would come along and say, you'll have to move. And I'd say, oh, no, this is private property. And the bank manager, Mr. Leahy, said I could trade here all weekend. So there was no mobile phones. There's no way to contact the bank manager. So you got the weekend out of the best pitch in town. So that was kind of how we always aimed straight for the bank, head for the bank on a Saturdays.
Pure guts there. Like, so you told me whenever we were chatting there last week that you kept getting took to court.
Well,
No, you did. You said that. Why not allowed to say that?
We traded on a Saturday in Belfast, and so the police used to leave the police station and walk around the town. They'd get to us by 1 o'clock, and they'd say, you have to move. So we would always pack up, but we knew the change shift at 2 o'clock. So you'd go off and have lunch, and by the time they got back to Musgrave Street, you'd set up again, and you knew the new shift wouldn't get back to 6 o'clock, which times it was going home time. And so as long as you had a lunch break, you generally didn't get arrested. And then so one of the days, this police officer with the big white stripes, he must have been an inspector, and he's out, and he leaned over and said to me, Mr. Boyle, you're not breaking any criminal code. He said, so I actually don't have the power to move you on. And I'm like going, well, I've been moving on for about a year. He said, well, if you want to stand there, it's up to the council to prosecute you. It's not up to me. I said, happy days. So I'll not move then. So that stage then, Belfast, I was at college doing a degree in business because my mum, being from Strabane, education was really important. So I wanted to keep my mother happy, so I was doing a degree in business at Georgetown. It was only 3 days a week, 14 hours, so I was running the stall the whole way through college. And but the council had decided to start taking our names and prosecuting us, so I'd kind of fancied my wife at Queen's. I used to sell, the students used to get the grant in September, so there was grants back then, so I'd set up inside the door of Students' Union. It was dry and hot, and everybody had a grant, so I could sell them earrings and belts. And so I'd met my wife there at the union, and I fancied her. And then one day I'm down in court, and I'm sitting, and I was up on a load of street trading charges, and the council couldn't get me fined. The judges used to not fine us because they quite liked it. The first ceasefire had come along, people would say, oh, it's a sign of normality coming back to Belfast. We're more like Dublin. So we were positively encouraged, apart from the council. So my wife walks up and she's in full barrister gear and she says, oh, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here on a licensing matter. What I didn't tell her is I didn't have a license, that I was being prosecuted. And so that went on for a while, and then eventually the council came down heavy on us and fined us substantial amounts of money. And Kira said to me, it's time, you're going to have to open a shop, So
before you jump on to open the shop, that takes guts to keep going to court and keep, getting fines. Yeah.
Well, in Strabane, we used to say they didn't consult us when they made the rules, so they don't count. That was kind of, and you grew up in Strabane, you had a healthy disdain for public authority, so I recommend everybody that should continue.
So I suppose if we're bringing that to modern day world, I'm trying to think how to turn that around for us. Taking risks. What you said to me, like, no one was going to die if I parked my stall there. And, you did say that to me. You were weighing up, the goals and how what the outcome was going to be, and then you decided whether to take that risk.
Well, not all entrepreneurship is good entrepreneurship,
Yes,
So you have drug dealers who are great entrepreneurs. They go to Colombia and they import their product, but it's not good for society. If you're standing selling a pair of earrings in Belfast, was anybody really getting hurt? I wasn't a bad person for selling jewellery on Royal Avenue, so we broke rules that were. Let's Go Hydra's the same. So we had bought Let's Go Hydra was a reservoir. I bought it for kayaking, which is what I was into. and we couldn't get planning permission. It was like complicated. The road wasn't good enough, and the case was: do we sit and wait for 4 years for permission, or is anybody really going to suffer if we let people jump in the lake and swim? So I figured, go ahead and open. So we built the aqua park there with more or less no planning at all. In fact, we still don't have planning, but hopefully that's coming through anytime soon.
See you in court.
So I think we've invested about 9 million in the site with virtually no planning permission. But again, we kind of summed up, will they give us it? They'll probably give us it eventually. And, they'll just take an awful long time to get to where I want to get to, and I need to get there much quicker than them. So, and that is a recurring theme,
That is a recurring theme. And to bring it back to us again, without us getting stuck in court, I'm trying to think. No, I suppose what I take out of that is, like, I was telling my daddy about you, this is much Anthony,
Yes.
you remind me a wee bit of him. And I says, Daddy, I met this man. He says, you should just do it. And if nobody's going to die and, nobody's going to get hurt, you should take that risk. He says, damn. Well, I'm not saying what he did. Damn right he was. So I take great, I get inspired by that. I don't know about all of you, but I'm like, yes, I am going to take that risk and launch that course, or say to that person here today, you wouldn't give me a hand. That's how I'm putting it into our way. But you were doing it in such a fearless, huge strides that worked out so well.
I mean, you do have to be careful too. I talk about self-awareness,
Yes.
So when I was street training and I had nothing, and you could tell a story in court, the judge always doing a degree. My wife used to defend me, and she'd say, oh, this poor young fella's doing a degree to fund his studies. And the judge had a kid who'd be at college, and you think, why are they prosecuting him? This is ridiculous. I'd throw it out of court. But now we're quite a large business, and I remember trying to tell a similar story, and I could remember the people in the table looking at me going, but you're huge, and so self-awareness of your own position, and us breaking the rules, not so funny anymore. And so you do have to be a lot more conscious of what people think of you before you can do things, so you can get away with an awful lot when you're a startup. You can break far more rules as a startup than you can as an established business. And so certainly as a startup, I think you've got to play a little bit loose with what people are telling you to do,
Push the boundaries.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, and it's different times now too. I don't think you get away with half that these days. But good for you, you did, or you wouldn't be sitting. Well, you probably would be sitting here anyway, going by the way you are. But it's just amazing to hear that, and I think it gives you great, I'm gonna get this done. So look, that attitude of not going to hurt anyone. You said you're going to open your shop then because you outgrew the market kind of stall, and that was in 1997. So things started to move quick then, didn't they?
Yeah, we're 25 years in business last November there. So we would have a big party only for COVID. So we didn't break that rule. But so we'll have to have the party this year. But I knew then we had to get a shop. I'd been in London and had seen a shop called Janet Fitch. It was a very cool jewellery store with glass. And back then, most jewellery stores were really old-fashioned, So Janet Fitch had all this glass and plastic, and it just looked awesome. People were queued out the street, and I went in and I lifted a ring, and I said, how much is this? And she said, £400, and I was like, and I knew I could buy that ring for $2 in Mexico, and I was thinking, hold on, well, my customer won't pay $400, or £400, but they might pay £40. So I'll just make the shop look exactly like this, modern, totally cool, and I will just get the price point that my customer will pay. So we took the kind of concept and then we delivered it more or less identical to what Janet Fitch was doing in a tiny little store. It was the size of a closet. It was like a walk-in wardrobe. If you'd,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure your wardrobe's much bigger, but it was a tiny little space, and it was just a chance. There's an awful lot of luck in business, and they say you make your own luck, but I literally was about to sign on a really bad unit. I was going around to sign the lease, and as I walked past this shop in what is Anderson Macaulay's, Zara, there was a painter painting this staircase into the basement, and I opened the door. I says, mate, what's going on here? And he goes, oh, it's a new small shop. And I had to phone the other landlord and go, I'm not coming around there, mate. I'm taking this shop, so. And then that was quite interesting too, because you learn as you go on. I remember the lease negotiations for this little tiny postage stamp of a shop, it was £100 a week, £5,000 a year. And my solicitor, who someone had recommended, was arguing over a clause in the lease that involved knocking down internal walls. I couldn't knock down internal walls, and there was all sorts of clauses. And I was like, but there is no internal walls. Just leave it in there. Why does it matter? And eventually the solicitor it was going on for months. And the agent said to me, if you don't sign this lease, you're not getting it. So I said, where's the pen? And I signed, my solicitor's going, you can't do that. And I was like, watch me, because it was so, you just had to, nowadays we are much more experienced in terms of leases, and you look back at your younger self and think, I wish I'd known that then. And every day is a learning day. Every day you learn, you make mistakes. Every mistake you make, you just make sure you don't repeat it, So it should only make a mistake once, and that goes in the memory bank.
The Dig podcast would not be possible if it wasn't for the support of the fantastic partners who team up with us each series. Series 6 is in partnership with Invest NI, my new business.
Mia was starting a new business and needed financial assistance and advice. She visited My New Business and accessed a directory of local support schemes. From grants and loans to advisory support, there was help available for her specific needs. Need help starting your new business? Visit nibusinessinfo.co.uk/mynewbusiness.
Now let's get back to making it happen.
You talked about taking your eye off the ball a wee bit when it came to the trends of jewellery.
Yeah, so I think as your business, you can set a lot of rules that are not rules. They're just rules you're tying yourself up with. So we became a real market leader in a new sector, which was silver jewellery. And that nearly damaged us because we were defining ourselves by the term silver jewellery. The jewellery had to be made of silver. And so we were sourcing all over the world. I'd fly to Mexico, I'd fly Poland, Indonesia, India. We were having a great time. There was a new sector. We were all making money from all over the world. We'd go into Mexico, big party in Tesco, we'd all buy jewellery and head off. It was great fun. But we'd defined ourselves by silver. And then I was at a wedding, a family wedding, and everybody in the room was getting discount in my shop. And none of the women were wearing my jewellery, So I was like thinking, hold on. And I happened to lean over and said, where did you get that necklace? And she was going, oh, it's Pilgrim,
Remember Pilgrim? Does everything remember?
It's a big flowery thing. And I just panicked and I realised everybody was wearing Pilgrim, and because Pilgrim didn't market themselves to silver jewellery, they were tending to sell into ladies' boutiques and chemists and things like that. And it was costume jewellery. So back in the 80s, costume jewellery was people brought out in a rash. You would remember, you're too young, obviously, but people's ears would, because of nickel. So nickel was the problem. And Pilgrim had realised they could make jewellery with no nickel. And so we hadn't realised people were buying silver mainly because it didn't bring you out in a rash. So it was affordable and it was high quality and it didn't have any nickel in it. But Pilgrim had cracked making costume jewellery with no nickel. Well, I went and we had to go to seal. So we had like £1.6 million of stock. We went on the 8-month seal. We sold everything that we dumped our stock. We got our stock down to like 300,000. We were in sale for 8 months. We wanted rid of everything. We got Pilgrim. I talked to her and she supplied us. So we became their largest client then in the UK. But we knew we needed to get costume jewellery. So I discovered that there was a trade exhibition in Hong Kong that sold costume jewellery. We flew over to Hong Kong and then we really nailed it. And that's
another story that this will be about.
So we met two Irish guys at that used to be street traders on O'Connell Street Bridge. They had both gone open silver stores in New Zealand and Australia. And in Hong Kong, the guys were saying about sourcing. Somebody was asking a question about sourcing. Sourcing's a problem because as you try to drive down the price, you inevitably drive up the volume. So that becomes that's the trade-off. Do you go for volume at low price or do you buy what you need at a slightly higher price? And we always were aiming for volume. So I was saying earlier, our goal was always to be buying out the factory door. So wholesalers hated me because I was looking at a wholesaler thinking, you're charging me a £5, mate, and I know you're paying £1 for it. I was immediately thinking, where did he get it? And if you're in the wholesale business, don't leave suppliers' labels on your boxes. So because we'd ordered goods from somebody, opened the box, and there was the name of the factory in the box, you know. So that was the last thing we bought off your man. You know, we were now phoning the factory. So we sourced stuff direct, and that then led, we split the orders. The guys would take quantity to Australia and New Zealand. So we formed a little buy-in group. We'd order 120, one colour, one item, split it up. I'd take 60, 30 would go to New Zealand, 30 would go to Australia, and that allowed us to buy the volumes out of the factories in China.
I thought that was genius in a way. I heard that. I was like, did I not think of that when I was doing children's, or like, then I was like, oh, probably would have been rules, but then you probably didn't listen to the rules. But, you know, the buy-in, like a buy-in group to try and reach the quantities, I thought that was deadly. Like,
Yeah, well, it also forced you to open more stores, you know, so you would then go and open, like, and when we would open, I think at that stage we were sitting on about 12 stores. And every time we took on a person to work in head office, I knew I had to open a shop to pay their wages. So that was roughly the maths, you know. So that person in head office wasn't generating any direct revenue. I had to pay their wages. And we knew the maths around each shop to make profit, but we knew once we had a whole team at head office, say marketing, handling stock, pricing, ticketing, purchasing, every time we added a body at head office, we opened a shop. So that took us to about 22 stores, you know. So again, we were just constantly expanding, you know.
and you talked to me about the fact that wasn't always easy. Like, I can't even imagine, but it did get to like 54 stores then, was it at the end?
Took it right up to 60 stores, but that was that buying group. So Michael, about a year and a half after I'd met them in Hong Kong, pulled out a little bead and said, my sales have travelled in Australia, and it was Pandora beads. And
Anybody wearing Pandora in the audience? Is there? Yes, there you go.
so we're still selling it, although we're not their big partner anymore, but they bought us out now. But my sales hadn't trebled. I remember thinking, God, my sales haven't trebled. But our initial reaction was, we'll make our own beads, you know, we'll make an Argento bead. We knew all the factories. We went and got our own beads made. We packaged it all up. And we did that for about 12 months. And I went back again, and Michael's still sitting in Australia. And he says, my sales have doubled. And I remember thinking, I've got this wrong. I just, you know, like a switch, and I thought, I've got this wrong. I need to get this brand, you know. So I was in Bangkok, and I went back to the hotel, and I had a few pints, and I think I was on the phone for 3 hours to this guy, trying to get him to supply my stores, you know. And then he said to me, Pete, you're very enthusiastic. He said, I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to ring some people in the industry and check, you know, if you're good to do business with, you know. So we had a thing where we always paid people on time. So, and we'd pay you early if we could. And so I used to say to the accountant, I had one accountant, he came from the British Army, and he had been working in their bars in Northern Ireland buying beer for the bars. And I remember my supplier rang me, and he said, Pete, is there something wrong with your business? He says, we haven't had money off you in 3 months, you know. And I said, I don't know what's wrong, Paul. Like, we always pay on time, you know. I'll ring. So I go to the office to the new accountant, and I says, Paul Kennedy says he didn't get paid. He says, oh, we never pay any bill till we get the solicitor's letter.
Oh,
I says, well, you don't do that here, but I said, the money that's at the bank account's not our money. It belongs to your suppliers. You just have to pay, just keep paying. You know, eventually we'll get some money after everybody's been paid, but you're kidding yourself if you think that money belongs to our company. It just belongs to our suppliers. So when Pandora phoned all our suppliers, he phoned me back 15 minutes later, and he said, well, the one thing I've learned, he says, I'll get paid. He says, everybody says, Pete Boyle will pay you, and he'll pay you on 3 days. If he's got the money, you'll get paid, you know. So I got Pandora.
so I asked you about that actually before we jump into Pandora. I said to you, what scares you the most? And you said debt.
Well, we didn't like debt, but the one thing that out of that was your reputation, you know. So we protected our reputation. You don't get a second crack at reputation. If you blow it, it's a long way back, you know. People trust, and a good reputation is vital. I'd say protect it with your life, you know, because it's something you need as you go forward. You do not know when someone will, you'll need help. You might need help, you know, from a supplier. You may need extended credit at some stage, but you've been paying them on time for 3 or 4 years. That extended credit won't be a problem, you know, so that's vital. What was the question?
Yeah, so no, I jumped in because I think our slideshow has went off there, if somebody has a wee look. But I jumped in because you were talking about money and paying people on time, and I wanted to touch on that debt because sometimes in business, the debt can overcome you and you actually can't even
Yeah.
lead with the trees. And you have a successful business, but you end up with this debt. So it's
Yeah.
just interesting to hear how someone like you navigated that, like with so many shops.
Well, when I left Manchester, I was doing aeronautical engineering, and I remember saying to the lecturer, "What does an aeronautical engineer actually do?" And he said, "You'll be designing weapon systems." And I was from Strabane. There's no way I was going back through Aldergrove Airport. And he says, "What do you do?" I design weapon systems. So, uh, uh, like, so that was me dropped out. But they were handing out student loans. The first year of student loan, people call me Thatcher's children. My generation apparently are called Thatcher's children. So we grew up in the 80s. That was an awful title, but I suppose it is kind of true. We were enterprise suddenly became something for the first time. That you could do. You could set up a business. I was thinking my father's generation. It wasn't an option. But I got a student loan. Was my first. That's what we started the business with. So after I'd done the MERS, I did a bit of college. And then I got a student loan. I bought a car for £180 and I bought a load of damaged posters at the student sale. And I went back for the summer, sold the posters in about 3 days, bought some jewellery off my friend in Dublin, and then this old Austin Maxi. I'd travelled around Ireland, but debt, we were always very cautious of debt. I used to take the notion, look, if it goes badly, I don't owe anybody any money, and I'll just do something else. That was kind of my attitude, So we'd flip money, So if I sold those posters, I get paid £300 for the posters. I'd flip them into £1,000. I took very little out, We used to go to festivals and I'd go, you deliberately take no money to the festival because if you went with money, it might not work, So if you turned up at the festival with a tenner, generally bought you your first meal, you had no money for your B&B or your hostel. So if you didn't earn any money that day, you were sleeping in the car, So it put a bit of discipline on you. You didn't go to the pub instead of setting up, because setting up a stall, I suppose, Instagram's probably the closest thing, where you have to put yourself out there. You land in a new town, you open your board and you stand there and you have to speak to strangers. It can be quite embarrassing at the start. You had to be quite forward, and I suspect social media is the new street stall. Don't think you'd ever, even if you started street trading tomorrow morning, Belva, I don't think you'd make any money. It's just not where people spend their time. People are spending their time at digital platform. And so as your startups now, they tend to be digital startups, and it's a much easier way to get seen,
Yeah, and you said about, I know I'm getting focused on the money, but let's face it, it's all about the money. Well, not all, but we are in it to try and earn across and keep our families going. But you said something really interesting to me, and about business owners who are doing real well. And the first year we're doing deadly, and the second year we're doing deadly. I'm going to buy a big Jeep, or I'm going to take the money out of business because I'm doing, or put it through the business. And then you were like, no.
We never took anything out. I mean, if I took, it was like a existence, barely existing at the time, like it was just, because we knew the capital was the key. So my stockpile had to get bigger. Eventually I had 2 stalls in Belfast, but each stall controlled about £15,000 of stock. So, I had to get to £30,000 of capital pretty quickly, and now we're in, Pandora bought 26 of our stores off us about 4 years ago. So we now have capital, and so the business like Let's Go Hydro is a very capital heavy business, so you had to buy the land, you had to invest in the site, and so capital is what make your business. And I watched a piece with Warren Buffett about compound interest, and he talks about how if you have £1, you turn it into 2 to 4, 4 to 6. He said if you buy yourself a sandwich when you make the £2, at the end of the day you're sitting at $500,000, not $1 million, in the same time and space. It can be, if you take money out very early, it has a massive compound impact on your overall growth of your capital. And so I hadn't thought about it at the time, but the money in the business at the time for me didn't feel like mine's. That was a good thing. So my mates would all say, "You made a lot of money. We'll go to the pub. Come on, sure that'll do you. It's 6 o'clock on a Friday. You've made plenty. Let's go." And I'd be like, "No, I have to stay here. I have to get up tomorrow morning at 8 to be here again. And they could never get it. But for me, the money that was in the business was just more stock. It was just more jewellery. And I knew I had to grow it. I knew I wasn't going to be standing on the street forever. It was only going to be fun while I was 20. It wasn't going to be so much fun when I was 52, So there had to be a progress. There had to be a way out. And we really, I remember my wife saying to me, and we had about 10 shops, "Why are we not rich?" And I was like, well, we will be eventually, but we opened 5 stores last year, and that all our money when they opened those 5 stores. And that's quite a shock too, because that year we got a big tax bill. And I remember saying to my accountant, but I have no money. And he said to me,
How many people say that whenever the tax bill comes in? They say,
and I was like, well, how am I getting such a big tax bill? He said, well, all your profit, Pete, you put into jewellery, and shop fits. And he says, that's capital depreciation over 10 years. You can't. I thought it was an overhead. I thought I could take the 100,000 I spent in shop fit, that would be a cost against my business. It turns out it wasn't. You had to write it off over 10 years. And so it was quite a shock to get handed this bill. I actually had to borrow money to pay the tax bill because we'd done, and that was what they call over trading too. That was like expanding too fast. And that nearly killed us. That was like a really difficult period because we'd expanded so fast. Growth was so key. We were going at such a speed that we really, like, cash wasn't keeping up. And so the person then that comes along looking for his piece is the tax man. He comes along and then he says register for VAT, and that's another shock. So the transition from trading without VAT to trading with VAT is quite a, I wish somebody had told me about that because it would have made my life a lot easier. So
yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in business. I suppose, would you say then just flip and ask the question to everybody? Like, I think people are afraid to ship it.
There's more information there than there was,
Yeah.
VAT, I'd recommend, if you know you're growing, just register and get on, register at the start. Don't wait till you reach the threshold. Register now because you'll get into a better habit of getting it right. And it won't be such a shock when you reach the threshold. So if you're a startup, I wished I'd registered earlier. Nowadays, cash, there's not a lot of cash. Our days, there was a lot of cash kicking about. People were trading in cash. Nobody was paying any tax. No income tax, no VAT, no money back, no guarantees.
Like, I went to London at the weekend and I'd lost my bank card, so I went into Dungannon and took money out of the bank.
Yeah.
I was going on a wee girls trip. I came back with it. Nobody had taken it. Everywhere I went, I was sorry, we don't take cash. I came back with girls that are with me here in the audience and they were laughing at me. I came back with the exact same money, so cash isn't like, nobody wants it.
Well, I was street trading. I was very lucky. I had a couple of guys give me good advice at an old street trader, and I was angry at a guy who'd opened a shop. It was a friend of mine who'd opened a shop almost identical to mine called Argento, and he was picking friends, and I was so angry at him, and I wanted to open a shop next door to him and show him, and I told Martin, I said, I'm going to show him, I'm going to open a shop. Martin says to me, never make decisions for negative reasons. He said, if it's not good for you, don't do it. If it's not, if you're only doing it to hurt someone else, it's don't make that decision. That was worthy, and so the other thing was my accountant once, I wanted to open a surf school in Rossnowden, County Donegal, and I had 15,000 in a supermarket bag from street trading that summer, and the house was 115,000, and I thought I'd teach surfing, this would be my life. And I went with my supermarket bag to the bank manager to borrow, try and get a mortgage. And my father said to me, Peter, you do know interest rates are 15%. So kind of puts things in perspective at 3% we're currently at. But my solicitor then leaned over and said to me, Pete, he says, cash will get you nowhere. He said to me, cash is only good for pissing up against a wall. That's what he said to me. And he was right. Again, we had gone through this period of growth early on with street trading. And that stage then, I registered with the accountant. We started paying our taxes. And because that's, if you wanted real growth, and I was very lucky those people were there to advise me, that really, Pete, you can only move forward with legitimate growth. Cash is fine when you're young and you're early, but I think that's even more exaggerated now because I would say in Argento, we take cash, but it's a pain in the ass. People steal it. I mean, that's all those things you see on the internet. Oh, keep cash alive because you get your tenner and you give your tenner to the butcher and the butcher gives it to the thing and that's nonsense because some staff member puts the tenner in their pocket, but the butchers, and the butcher never sees the tenner, so
Yeah.
we've had so many big cash thefts out of our company over the years, we love cards because it goes straight to the bank account. We don't have to pay a guy with an armoured vehicle to come down and empty the shop. Cash creates a lot of problems, and so, I mean, if you're a young startup and the money ends up straight in your account, that's pretty cool.
God, you can talk all day about all the different topics, but talk to us now though. So Pandora came on and things went crazy and all the shops, like you told me about driving there, was it Waterford overnight and opening your shop in a week?
Pandora, So we got it in the shop, and actually it ended up in the warehouse, and it was the first product ever I bought where the girls in the warehouse opened the box, and by the time they'd taken it, got it to send to the shop, they'd already bought half the product before it even got it. I remember thinking, oh God, I phoned the guy, says, you better send 3 times as much, mate. I've sold it before it even got to the shop, and then it just took off, and then that was like a hugely stressful thing. I guess it's my made it stressful. We wanted to make the most. We'd found this product and we really wanted to, we put it in there 15 stores, and then it just took off like a rocket, So we went from about a £5 million turnover business to 60 million, in about 4 years. At one stage we were opening 9 shops a year, I was never in the house.
How did that go down?
Well, it was all right. We had babies and nappies, so I was glad to be in the house. As we said, so everybody tells you that they're going away, and it's a great. It was a great pain. It actually was. It wasn't so painful. It was more painful for my wife, thank you, Kira. But I had to be away at that time, and so that's the interesting thing about entrepreneurship. People say it's all good. It puts strain on your life. It causes stress. It puts strain on your family. So be careful what you wish for, and make sure you know that it fits with you. So it's not all good news in entrepreneurship. I find this constant obsession with entrepreneurship at the minute. It's not always, there's downsides, like there's...
Talk about that. Talk about that.
Well, if you're good at it, it'll eat your brain, So there's nights I don't sleep, there's just, if you are constantly obsessed with the health of your enterprise, and that's what good entrepreneurship is, you put it before everything else, family, relationships. It's just about the health of the enterprise. It's about how can I make this enterprise better, 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 better. And one of the things I did was I projected my my personality onto my friends. So I'd, someone, they would see what I was doing and say, oh, I want to open a business. And I'd set it all up for them or help them and get them started. And then it would all go wrong, And I used to get really annoyed at them, I'd say, hey, why did you not do this? And why did you not do that? And it took me till I was about 35 to realize I was projecting me onto them. And they were getting, it was really hurting them. They were getting stressed. They were getting into bad situations. And they actually weren't entrepreneurs, but to me, it was just so easy. I thought, are you stupid? I used to scream. I was talking to my friend Enda about it last night, and he was one of the victims. He ended up opening a shop and all. And he says to me, I was never a businessman, Pete. I hated it, and he says, and I had projected onto him. And so you've got to be careful. It doesn't suit everybody, and it can be stressful. It can be lonely. It can ruin relationships. Because you're so focused. Nothing else matters. I remember my family. I probably hadn't been at a birthday party for 5 years. I'm not talking about my wife. I'm talking about my brothers, sisters, and weddings. I just didn't. I was away. If something came up in the summer, I was so focused on that. Hong Kong Trade Exhibition, couldn't miss it. Had to be in Hong Kong in September, and there was always things in September, but I simply had to spend that week in Hong Kong buying product, so there's definitely downsides, so it's not all rosy.
I know. I think that's so interesting because we're so obsessed with it. I know, and I feel so guilty. Like the title of my podcast is "Making It Happen," but we're going to have people up on the stage later, and one of their making it happen was getting more time with their family. It wasn't about the money or the the success or whatever. So making it happen means different things. That's so interesting for you. But do you think if you went to the birthday parties and did all them things that you would be as successful as you are now?
Definitely not. No.
I know. So you have to weigh up, like.
Look at. Don't be wrong. It's in me.
It's in you.
And I just loved work. The first day I arrived at my first job, I just loved it. I just thought I like doing this. So you never really talked me into going to work. I was first there. So street trading suited me. You had to get there first in the morning. I remember one time in Ballyshannon, I always had the best pitch, and Harry Krishna's turned up with their chain bells. And I arrived the Friday, and Harry Krishna were sitting in my pitch, and I'd had this pitch for 7 years. And I said, Harry, hi lads, and all the other traders said, that's Pete's pitch, you'll have to go. The Harrys are like, no, definitely not. He's not here. Well, I just thought, well, you see tomorrow morning, I'll be here. So I parked the van up from the corner, and I slept in the van at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had my pitch back, So, I had, for me, work was just, and my wife will tell you it's the same. It's just, I'm running out of energy right now. I'm 52. I'm not quite as game as I was at 25, but
I think you're well entitled to take a wee rest there after all you've achieved. But I'm raging. This is only half an hour that I can fit in with you, but like I was fascinated. I've been talking about you to everybody since I met you last week, because it's that that realism that, you know, it does kind of take over your life, your business sometimes. But I suppose your wife knew what she was getting when she got you. Yeah.
Kira's been very good with me, because like she keep, you know, she did remind me that there was other things to do apart from work, and so she entered it just on the balance for me, and she was right when she realised we had to open a store. You know, actually the funny thing about my street stalls was, they always sat in the garage for about a year and a half, and then these two boys from Portadown said they would buy them off me, so I showed them stuff, and the next day they stole it all overnight, you know. And I'll get those Portadown guys a bit, but I haven't seen them since, right enough. But my wife, the next day, I was like bemoaning the fact that my stalls had been stolen, and she said, "You know what? It's a good thing, because there's no going back now. There's certainly no way back." And it kind of dawned on me a week later, actually, that's great, because that's gone. That part of my life is behind me, and I don't have to worry about it. You know?
So I said to Pete when I was leaving, so Pete's new home that they've renovated is called Ormiston House. If anybody wants to look it up on Instagram, when they sent me where I was going to meet him, I thought I was going to like a block of like building like offices. You're going to meet Pete in Ormiston House. I was like, oh, dead on. And I was like, oh my God, I should have worn a fascinator, this like castle. And it's unreal. But we were standing in the foyer when I was leaving, and I said to Pete, like, do you ever just think like, oh my God, like, how is this mine? And you said to me, do you remember what you said?
No.
You never rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
You never take it for granted.
Well, it's like, it was an awesome thing to have done, you know. It was at the end of our street, that's how we bought it, and then, you know, my wife said, "Why aren't we rich?" And I said, "We'll get the money eventually." Well, that was the day that we got the money eventually. So, and we did this project. It was 4 years of our life restoring it, you know. And it was an awesome thing. I don't think I'll do another one. It was kind of exhausting.
But in general, I mean, rest on your laurels in life and business. You said to me, like, you don't take it for granted what you got, because you literally started with nothing.
Well, I mean, you don't write your story. In some ways, you know, you just read it back. So you look back at your story, you know. I mean, I didn't have it all written to get to here, you know, and so it's our home, you know. So we wake up and run in, yes, and it's most amazing at night, because I was coming in last night from the pub at about 11:30, and it's pitch dark, and at that time it's very, very beautiful in the silent, snowy darkness, and that's at those times, yes, you have to laugh and think, how do we end up here, you know?
From the market stall to that amazing building. But so what advice would you give to people, and I've ended the podcast, every podcast in this series with this, who are struggling in whatever way to make it happen, and whether that be more time with family, more money in the bank, and more success? What would you say in general to making it happen?
Like I use the term self-awareness. It's very important that you stop and examine where you are now. It's a bit like me saying that thing that I'm not the underdog. I mean, I had said a quick comment in this company that we were in at a table that would have been funny when I was a street trader with nothing, but no one laughed at this comment, because I hadn't realised I was now not an underdog. I was seen as a big player, and it wasn't a funny comment anymore for someone who was a big player. So be aware of what you want, of where you are now. Don't mistake where you were with where you are now. Your situation changes, you know. I mean, startups are quite funny. You can get a lot of stuff for free as a startup. You know, BBC will do a piece about you. You know, If we go to UTV now, they say it was 35,000, mate. You know, we're not writing about you. So as a startup, use those benefits, but you must be self-aware of where, you know, what you want, what makes you happy, what won't make you happy. Make sure you don't go down the wrong direction with things. And be lucky, hopefully. You know, we've been very lucky along the line. I opened a surf shop in 95 in Rossnella, and I had a tenner left, and I remember I'd painted the shop, and this wee man walked into me and he says to me, "You do realise it'll rain all summer and you'll lose everything." And now the last day in May, and the sun came out, and it was the hottest year in 100 years, and I had sun cream and ice cream on a beach in Rossnella. And it didn't rain. I think it rained 2 days between May and September. So sometimes you need a lot of luck, you know, and you just be grateful when the lucky things come along, you know. If you're unlucky, don't bother, or just maybe find something else.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dig podcast. It's an absolute privilege to be your host every week and to spend time with the most driven, inspirational people. Don't forget to tag us on social at Dig for Success if you enjoyed this week's conversation. And until next week, keep taking those steps to making it happen in your business and in your life.